The number one issue on Kauai regarding GMO crops is the chemical exposure that comes with the GMO crops. These are crops that have been genetically altered unnaturally to accept greater amounts of chemicals being applied to them as part of the farming process. There is a union between these GMO seeds and the chemicals that go along with them, and they come as a package. And here on Kauai, because we are a world-leading place of GMO experimentation, we have tons of chemicals being applied all the time. 70 different chemicals, 7 out of 10 days is what we've had reported. And this is a huge problem for the population, for the environment. We are seeing all sorts of health disorders, from skin rashes to miscarriages to cancer and death, asthma, even greater incidence of allergic reactions. What we really need is a real health survey to happen on the islands. We need to get a handle on what these chemicals are doing to the people of the islands. The water, already has been found to contain some of these different chemical elements. Atrazine has been reported at the Waimea School drinking fountain. We know that there was a massive die-off of sea urchins last year. In the air, the chemicals are blowing through the air. They're blowing, they blow into people's homes. They blow onto organic farmers if they're downwind. And I think you are going to get more and more people to connect the dots to say this GMO industry and all these chemicals, that is connected, dink, 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 to Kauai, to the Hawaiian Islands. And you know what, maybe I'd rather vacation somewhere else. The second issue with genetic engineering, and possibly even the most dangerous long-term issue, is the sort of random mutations and mutilations that we're doing at the genetic level to these plants and animals. When this industry started, they thought there was an industrial gene model, basically that one gene would lead to the building of one protein, and it was a simple connection. But it turns out that model is now known to be false. And so we're now realizing it's much more complex and interconnected than we first thought, yet we're going in randomly blasting gene pieces into random locations without knowing where they land, what wires have been cut, what wires are now put in other places, possibly turning on something like a cancer gene or another disease. And the industry doesn't test for these things. They are not required to test for these things. New proteins are being formed out of these GMO crops, and they are not required to test the effects of these proteins on the human body or on the environment. When they cross a tomato and a fish, and they put fish genes in the tomato, the cells of the tomato plant know naturally to reject that foreign DNA from the fish. But what we do is we force it in. It's almost rape at the cellular level. We either break open the cell walls with zaps of electricity, or we put those gene pieces on a gene gun and blast it in at high speeds where it blasts through the cell walls and hopefully lands in the DNA sequence. And it's very inexact. It's basically shooting a shotgun at the source code and hoping it lands somewhere good. Industry and government are basically tied at the hip. You have former industry people in all levels of the government that are approving these crops and approving them to not be regulated. For example, we have the classic example of Michael Taylor, who was a lawyer for a law firm that worked for Monsanto, who drew up the regulations that Monsanto would like to see regarding GMO crops. Then he quit his law firm and was appointed assistant director of the FDA, overruled lower level scientists' opinions that the stuff was dangerous, and approved basically a rewrite of the stuff he had written at the law firm. So Monsanto basically wrote the law, got its man on the inside, and then approved its own law. And so the government really needs to do full lifetime feeding trials under peer-reviewed conditions and by independent scientists and not the companies themselves if we're going to find out what is happening here. We're all in this together, everybody. Everybody that lives here on the island, everybody that lives here on the earth. There's no natural boundaries that are going to keep things separated. We all breathe the same air. We all drink the same water. We're all affected by this. If there's chemicals in the water that are doing chemical castration, and lowering our ability to reproduce and to have babies without birth defects, that's going to affect everybody. That's just not going to affect, you know, just the people in Waimea. And it's not going to only affect the people working in those fields. It will eventually affect us all. And even if you're the guys making the profits on this, even if you're the guys in the county approving all this, we're eventually all going to be affected by this. And so I think it's in everyone's best interest to keep it clean, keep it healthy, and to create an environment where we can all grow up and make the most of our lives and live the longest, healthiest, happiest lives that we can.